You're listening to episode 212 of the Autism Mom Coach, Back to School series, answers to the 5 what-if questions keeping autism moms up at night.
Hi, I'm Lisa Candera, mother to an 18-year-old son with autism and founder of the Autism Mom Coach. Through years of trial and error, I have created tools that have helped me stop escalating meltdowns, make impossible decisions, and advocate more effectively for my son. I've now coached over 100 moms through these same struggles. In this podcast, I share everything I've learned and what I am still learning with you. Let's get started.
In this week's episode, we are going to apply the 5-step protocol that I use for answering those what-if questions to the most common what-if questions I hear from autism moms leading up to, and let's be honest, throughout the school year. If you missed last week's episode, I highly recommend that you go back and listen because that is where I lay out the protocol in detail and how it works. Either way, here is a quick recap. Step 1 is to clearly define the problem/issue. Step 2 is to rate it. How likely is it and how big of a problem is this? Step 3, define your options. Step 4, determine what you can do right now. And then finally, step 5, create your if-then statement of if this happens, then exactly what you will do. It's your action plan. Again, we do this ahead of time. We make these decisions ahead of time. So if and when the thing happens, we are prepared. We have a strategy. We know what to do. All right, let's get started with question number 1. This question comes from one of my clients, and her question was, what if my child gets a teacher or a paraprofessional who does not understand them? In this particular situation, there were 2 options for the 3rd grade teacher, and she had a definite preference towards this newer teacher. She was young. She had a real bubbly personality. She thought that her daughter would connect more easily with her. She also thought that this teacher, being younger, might have more patience just because. The other option was a teacher who was a more senior teacher. She had a good reputation, but she was just more reserved. And my client had a harder time getting a read on her, and she wondered if she would be perhaps a stricter teacher, have less tolerance for her child's behaviors, misinterpret her child's behaviors. And so she had concerns. And so she wanted the young, bubbly teacher. The first step was defining it. What does doesn't understand actually mean? That's a really vague kind of worry to have. And when she drilled down to it, she was just afraid that this teacher would misinterpret her child's avoidance as disrespect and her selective mutism as being rude. And she was afraid that there would be consequences to her child because of this. So that was the issue. Next, we rated it. How likely is this? Now, for this one, you could say it's 50-50, right? But I actually encouraged my client to look at this as likely, and here is why. It is likely that our children are going to encounter teachers, paraprofessionals, staff who do not understand them, who do not immediately get them, who need to be educated about their presentation. And so it is likely that someone is not going to immediately just get your child. Think of all of the time that you spend trying to understand your child and their cues. It is going to take some time, which led us into how big of a problem is this? And again, here, I see this as the normal friction that you are going to experience as an autism parent, that our children are going to experience as they acclimate to different scenarios. So it's a real big problem if the teacher is outright mean to her, is discriminating against her. But that really wasn't the concern. The concern was she wasn't going to get her. And how big of a problem is that really? Or is that just really the normal, typical thing that we would expect and something that we can work proactively to address? So for this, we rated it as likely. And how big of a problem is it? On a scale from 1 to 10, she put it about a 3. Next, determine your options. This is the part where we move from spinning in our head to putting our brain to work looking for solutions. And the challenge here is to come up with as many options as you can think of, even if they aren't options that you would actually do, just to show yourself that there are options other than the worst case scenario, whatever your brain has made that out to be. So for this one, some of the options she came up with is requesting a teacher swap. She could do that. She could reach out to the teacher before the school year starts, set up a meet and greet with the teacher, give the teacher a one-pager about her child, ask the teacher to meet with the teacher from the year before just to get some insight into what worked and what didn't work for her daughter. She could discuss it with the case manager. She could call an IEP meeting. There were all sorts of things that she could do. And also, the other, finally, she could just do nothing. She could just wait and see. That was also an option. Next, decide of these options, what can I do right now? What feels good for me to do right now in this situation? And for my client, she decided to be proactive about building a relationship with the new teacher. As a teacher herself, she knew that it is really helpful when parents are communicative and when they give you sort of the inside scoop and they really try to be part of the process. She knew as a teacher, she appreciated that. So she wanted to give that same kindness and respect to her daughter's teacher. And so she reached out to the teacher. She arranged a little meet and greet with her daughter before the school year started. And she gave the teacher a one pager on her daughter with some things that she might see, especially in the first week as she acclimated. And she might be selectively mute during that first week or two as she acclimates, making sure that she understood what was happening. And so that, the teacher would be on notice about what she may and may not see from this kiddo. That is what she decided to do. And then finally, we did the if when statement. And so this is, again, it was a pretty vague one. Like, how do you know that the teacher doesn't understand your child? What evidence would you actually have of that? And so here she decided if she gets phone calls or emails from the teacher about her daughter's behavior or in-class presentation, she would request a meeting with the teacher, gather more information. She would propose strategies. She would bring it up at the beginning of the year IEP meeting, and she would request a meeting sooner than that if she needed to. So that became her if then plan. So instead of just spinning about the what ifs, she could redirect herself to what she was going to do in that moment and what she would do if when the thing happened. What if question number 2? What if the school calls me about my child's behaviors? Now, this is a concern, a what if that I hear from many, many of my clients, and it is certainly one that I have had and still have for my kiddo. For this situation, one of my clients got a phone call last year because her 4th grade daughter had cleared the classroom around mid-morning because of a change in the schedule. And now going into 5th grade, my client is terrified that this was going to happen again. So first, define it. The specific fear here is that the school will call to report a behavior such as disrupting the classroom, yelling, shutting down, refusing to work. Then we rated it. How likely is it? Again, given that this happened the year before, we put it in the likely category just based on that alone. It doesn't mean that it was guaranteed to happen, but it was certainly possible because it had happened before and rather close in time. Then How big of a problem is this really? Now, this piece of it is just to give you that context, to remind yourself, because when you're in it, everything can feel like a 10, but not everything is. And so for this client, we talked about how the disruption the previous school year was helpful because her fourth grade child, her daughter, was a really good masker. And up to that point, when my client had talked to teachers about different challenges they were having at home with her child due to anxiety, they were pretty clueless because the child that they saw was always on her P's and Q's. So her child having this disruption in the classroom, everybody witnessing it, actually became an avenue for my client to advocate for additional support. And it also just created more awareness. So, how big of a problem is it? It was just not really that big of a problem for real. It's not something anybody wants to experience, but in the scheme of things, it was in the ordinary course of having a child with autism in a neurotypical school setting. The other piece of this was my client's concerns about the interruption to her work schedule. How big of a problem was it? Not really that big. Getting one phone call in a year hadn't touched her work schedule at all. It hadn't impacted it at all. And so, although she didn't look forward to it and she dreaded it, we really were able to focus on the fact that she spent more time in that dreading it would happen than the time it actually took out of her work day when it did happen. So, for how big of a problem is this? Not really that big at all. In fact, she reflected on when her daughter had sprained her wrist the year before, she was picking up her daughter multiple times a week, a little bit early, or they were going in a little bit later for just different PT and things like that. Or the year that her daughter got strep throat and she had to come pick her up from school. There are all types of situations where she actually had to leave work to pick her daughter up from school that had nothing to do with behaviors. But when she thought about it being tied to behaviors, it just gave her so much anxiety. So, this process, again, is to take you out of that emergency situation and create context. Next, determine your options. So, for this one, my client could educate the teacher about her child's behaviors ahead of time. She could set up a protocol for phone calls from school so that she only received phone calls that were actual emergencies, not a FYI for your information. She could ask questions when she received the call instead of automatically jumping to think that she needed to pick up her kiddo. She could determine, how is my child doing now? Have they recovered? Is it necessary for me to come to the school? In the case where it was necessary, she could designate another family member to do the pickup. If in fact she had to do the thing, she had to do the pickup, she could let her boss know ahead of time that this is a possibility, if that even applied at all. But I did have another client who had a similar situation where she was getting called multiple times a week to pick up her kiddo due to different issues at school and with the school bus. And she actually took FMLA leave for a few weeks just to get through it. Now, again, I'm not saying that this is something you would actually do, but just laying it out there, you do have options. That might be a possibility for you. It might be a possibility to take PTO. It might be a possibility to ask a partner. Define all of your options. And then four, decide what you can do now. So, going into this next school year, this client did something similar as the client that I spoke about a couple of minutes ago, where she did a meet and greet with the teacher. She provided the teacher with a one pager. She talked to the teacher about the situation that had come up the year before and how it was handled and what was discovered. She had lots of options about what she could do in this moment rather than just spinning in the what if it happens, when in fact, it actually never did happen that school year. And then finally, the if then statement. If I get a call from the school, what will I do? And a lot of her if then statement is wrapped up in the option to ask questions, determine what's happening now, determine whether a pickup was necessary. If she was unable to leave work, calling the grandparent or the partner or a friend to pick up her child. She had a lot on her list of if then that she never even had to use in this situation, but she will have that same formula for the years to come. Some of the details might change, but that what if she has proof of concept of having a plan and never even having to execute it because it didn't happen. Question number 3. What if the school doesn't follow the IEP? Now, again, this is a really broad and general concern that all of us have. And so for here, I challenged my client to get very specific with the concern. And the specific concern was that the school would not follow protocol related to reading aloud questions for tests and quizzes. This had happened the year before where the teacher had failed to do this, and my client is concerned that it's going to happen this coming year. And so the specific issue is the reading aloud of test and quiz questions. Rating it first. Is it likely? Yes, it is likely. It happened before, it happened recently. How big of a problem is this? This is a big problem. This child's IEP provides for this so that her child can perform on tests and quizzes to her ability. She needs this accommodation. So, next, we mapped out her options. She could reach out to the case manager ahead of the year and remind her of these concerns. She could reach out to the teacher and to the staff to let them know that this is part of the IEP. Don't assume that they've read it and then that they already know. Instead, sending an email introducing herself, introducing the daughter, and this particular provision of the IEP so that they know and it's on their radar right away. Other options, she could request an emergency IEP meeting for the beginning of the year to address this, and she could consult a special education advocate or attorney. Number 4, what can she do now? She's reached out to the team, she's communicated her concerns, and right now she's in a bit of a wait and see. And number 5, if then. If it happens that after all of this, that her daughter has her first test and quiz and this accommodation has not been provided, she's going to request an emergency IEP meeting and attach a parent concern letter to that request documenting the failures and her concerns. And she may also, if then, consult with a special education advocate and bring them to the meeting. Question number 4. What if my child resists going to school? This is a common one for a lot of us. There is a lot of resistance and protesting in the morning. So let's define it. The concern is my child will protest, complain, they will resist getting on the school bus, into the car, or out of the car at drop off. Rate it. How likely is this? Well, if your kid's never done it, then I'm not going to say it's likely. I'm going to put that at not likely. But if they've done it before or you suspect that there's something different that could cause them to do it now, likely. How big of a problem is this? Again, I would put this in the range of the normal friction of raising a kiddo with autism. High anxiety, they have issues with routine and change, and in the range of how big of a problem is it, I would say like less than a 5 on a scale from 1 to 10. Next, what are your options? First, you can simply just expect it. You can expect the whining and complaining and the resistance in the morning. 2, you can write it out like many of us do. 3, you could talk to the school about it, communicate to them the high level of anxiety that is happening so that you can connect what's going on at home to the school day because they are connected. Number 4, you could wait for your child to regulate themselves. And I've had many clients that have done this. They get really worked up in the morning and they're able to calm down, but by the time they've calmed down, they're going to be a little bit late for school. So just taking it on the chin, dropping them off late, explain what's going on, but also documenting it and connecting it to the anxiety related to school because this is related to school. Next, what can you do right now? If this is an issue that your child has had in the past, other options that you can explore are things like the one on one aid. Is it an easier transition for your child? Let's say they're coming in from a bus or a car, if the one on one aid meets them there. I had this exact issue with my son where he would resist getting out of my car and he'd want me to walk him into the school until we finally came up with a solution that the one on one aid would meet us at the car and escort him in. And that did the trick. So then next, what do you do right now? You can communicate with the school if this has been a chronic issue and talk about ways to address it. Maybe you're setting up for the one-on-one aid or another safe person to be the first person that your kiddo sees when they're getting out of the car or getting off the bus. Or maybe you are planning your morning ahead of time to account for the 20, 30-minute delay, the resistance, because it's just part of the schedule at this point. And then finally, what you can do right now is just take a deep breath, relax yourself as much as possible. If this does happen, if they do resist, it's a pretty typical thing that happens. And the more grounded that you can stay, just reminding yourself that this feels big right now, but this is pretty typical, the easier it will be for you in the moment to stay grounded and just really ride the wave. Final question. What if my child is perfect at school, then explodes at home? This is a really common one, especially as our kiddos get older. And based on my experience with the clients I coach, so much so in young girls. Girls are able to mask like no other, and they're also able to light it up when they get home from school like no other. So, first, define the fear. The fear is that your child holds it in all day at school and then loses their shit when they get home. The fear is also that when you are communicating the school with the school your concerns, they have no idea what you're talking about and you're kind of feeling like maybe it's just me and maybe this is my fault. That is what you are dreading. That is what you are anticipating. That is the issue. Next, rate it. How likely is it? I put this one at likely for any kid with autism that there are going to be days, weeks, maybe every day where they're coming home and they are done and they are just letting it out, whether they are coming in like ready to fight or they are just collapsing and want nothing to do with anyone. That is a very likely scenario for any kid with autism. How big of a problem is it? If your kid is not being dangerous towards themselves or others and they're not destroying property, it's not really that big of a problem in the scheme of things of parenting a kid with autism. If they're rude, if they're disrespectful, if they're ignoring you, if you don't think that they are carrying their load with respect to responsibilities and chores, that might feel like a big problem for you, but in the scheme of things, it's rather small. Next, what are your options? So, thinking about this being before the school year starts, you can preview this to the school proactively by saying, because my kid masks a lot during the day, and what this means is what you will see is a child who is polite, who is conformist, who follows all the rules, is no problem. That child, because of that, is just letting out loose at home. And in this way, instead of the we don't see it here, you're telling them, here is what you will see because of what's happening at home. So you can connect those things. You're also educating. You can brainstorm with the school. Are there ways for your child to sort of let out the steam during the day? Are there certain breaks that can be afforded to them? Walking breaks, hall passes? Is there something maybe even at the end of the day, the last period that they can do just to be able to reset and regulate themselves just a little bit before they come home to school? That could be perhaps a check-in with a social worker or a preferred teacher, the one-on-one aid, just so that they can, leave school at school to some degree. What else can you do now? You can drop your expectations about how you think your kiddo should act when they get home. You can remind yourself that these behaviors aren't personal. You can redirect yourself to other activities other than asking them, how was your day? What did you do? Do you have homework? Really just preparing yourself to take a step back to give them the space they need. What can you do right now? Everything I just said, all of those things are things that you can do right now. You can reach out to the school, you can be proactive in your communication, and you can also be proactive in your own expectations and your own ability, your own willingness to just let this unfold the way it does. Maybe they're going to come home and slam the door and not talk to you. Maybe they are going to be a little bit rude, a little bit hostile for a little bit. Just give them their time so they can regulate, and you can also not add to any of their stress and anxiety with questions and demands. All right, that is it for the 5 questions. The point of doing this ahead of time is not to predict how the school year will go, because you can't. Again, I've talked to you about issues that I've prepared clients for that never even happened. The idea here is that you move your brain to these general what ifs to a solid plan that you can execute, so you can refocus yourself from wanting to catastrophize to reminding yourself there are options and I have a plan. And when you do this, you're going to show up so much more effectively. You're going to be confident, you're going to be in control, and you will be the grounding force that your child needs. All right, everyone, that is it for this week's episode of the podcast. I hope this was helpful, and best of luck this new school year. Take care, and I will talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Autism Mom Coach. If you are ready to apply the principles you are learning in these episodes to your life, it is time to schedule a consultation call with me. Podcasts are great, but the ahas are fleeting. Real change comes from application and implementation, and this is exactly what we do in my one-on-one coaching program. To schedule your consultation, go to my website, theautismmomcoach.com, work with me, and take the first step to taking better care of yourself so that you can show up as the parent you want to be for your child with autism.